briefly introduce myself, and then I'll hand it over to our moderator today, who is the curator of the show, Sarah Sloan. I'm Tony Huffman. I'm the curator in residence at Kunstraum. And so this, I just wanted to go over some brief housekeeping items that I'm sure you're all aware of after doing so many Zoom meetings throughout and good panels and webinars over the past year and a half. So just please go ahead and mute yourselves. There'll be time at the end for your chance to ask questions, but just as basic Zoom etiquette, please, so there's no distractions during the presentation part, just mute yourselves. And then also we will be recording this program. So if you are uncomfortable with your likeness being captured, you can turn off the video feature, and that's that. And we'll also be taking screenshots throughout the program just to document the show, the event, and we'll be promoting the event afterwards. Lastly, if you don't care to also, if you plan on engaging and asking questions, just beside your name, enter your preferred pronoun so that we're all on the same page about respecting how people like to be referred and referenced to. And then that's pretty much it for kind of the basic housekeeping things. So I'll launch into our introductions. So Kunstraum is a gallery and studio space south of the Brooklyn Navy Yard. As an interdisciplinary team of curators, artists, and architects, we seek to promote emerging art as well as outstanding exhibition concepts, featuring both established and emerging artists. Kunstraum aims to redefine the ways artists and curators collaborate by opening our gallery to different art professionals interested in sharing engaging ideas, unconventional thinking, and risk-taking. We push the parameters of emerging international contemporary art. And so it's been my pleasure over the past few weeks to work closely with Sarah, who is also our assistant managing director, but she's been working in a capacity as guest curator to realize this show. And so it's been really great to see this show take form and shape and interact with the artist. And so it is up for several more weeks. So I hope that after this panel that it only heightens your interest, and maybe you've already been, but you want to go back with this renewed context and kind of the topics we're going to get into today. So Sarah is an independent curator and arts professional working in Brooklyn. She has filled roles at the nonprofit Asia Contemporary Art Week, as well as the 2020 edition of the Armory Show. Currently, she maintains the position of assistant managing director at Kunstraum, as well as the curatorial assistant with the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation. Speeding Up, Slowing Down, the Practice of Feminine Artmaking is their first exhibition in New York City. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Sarah, to begin our program.
All right, thanks so much for that introduction, Tony, and thanks all of you for being here today. Just to go ahead and get started, I wanted to give you guys sort of an introduction to the exhibition, because I know not all of you have been able to come in person and see it. So I'm just going to show you a couple of exhibition shots so you kind of have a visualization of what it looks like and what we're really talking about. So
hey, Google.
Okay. All right, so we're right here in the front hallway of Kunstraum LLC Gallery. You can see we have the whole Speeding Up, Slowing Down exhibition text next to an artwork by Kong-Tom Nguyen, and then also some artwork by Sarah Rain Hammond, and then we have Austin Kudre, and you can kind of see there back in the back, Yurie Hayashi. Going around the bend there, you see more artwork. You can really see sort of the scope of Yurie's work. It's quite large. And then you also have a sculpture by Austin Kudre. You have two works here by Trindresa Mani. And then you also have a sort of assemblage piece by Kong-Tom Nguyen, and then two other textile works. So that's just a little brief overview of what the actual space is looking like. So if you haven't been able to come in yet, I would love to show you the space in person. These works really show up in person. I hope that we can understand them through the pictures, but you'll really understand them much better if you come in person and can really see all the details. But just to get started here too, my exhibition concept, I wanted to talk to you guys about sort of the title of the show, specifically about the phrasing of slowing down, speeding up, slowing down, and then also the use of feminine in quotation marks specifically in the title of the show. So speeding up, slowing down, you see I have a picture of a roller coaster here because this is supposed to sort of be indicative of the artist process of creating, where sometimes it's really fast and you're going up, or it's really fast and you're going down, right? And then sometimes it's slower and you're kind of going up and creating an idea. And so partially this show is about process. So it's really about sort of how each of the artists in this show create work in different ways. For instance, Chandra Samani, she creates work over multiple years, whereas Sarah Rain Hammond, she creates works in a day very quickly. So that's where that sort of like first blurb in the title comes from. And then I also use the word feminine here, specifically in quotation marks, to sort of reference the idea of like what femininity has been in the past as far in art historical context. I'll talk more about that a little bit in a minute, but that's why it's in quotation marks, because as I'm sure you can tell just by looking at the artist list for this show, not every artist in this show identifies as female. So we have artists of non-binary, we have he him, we have she her, so it's really not about artists who are women. It's about all artists sort of being put into certain categories of femininity and if we even need it and things like that. And then also here I have a picture of June Wayne. Do you mind muting yourself? Okay, yeah, so I have a picture here of June Wayne, who is a famous, well, she was a printmaker back in, like, I would say like the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s. I think she started to become a little bit more prolific. But the reason I'm referencing her here today is because whenever I was doing research for the show, I was trying to, kind of come up with articles about feminine art and what it means. And I ran across this article by June Wayne that was written for the College Art Association meeting in 1973. So it is quite scholarly. And the title of it was "The Male Artist as a Stereotypical Female." And I was just thinking, wow, even though this article is a bit dated, it's from the 70s, it was really sort of an idea that I feel like we all sort of knew it, but we hadn't quite seen something written in a scholarly text talking about it. But her main idea is basically that even though, like, regardless of gender, artists are always sort of put into these stereotypical ideas of femininity, such as whenever they're creating work, they are often likened to sort of giving birth. They have this sort of very creative process. They're very emotional. They're very, sort of romantic. And that's really what she gets, at least in part, to in this article. And so I was really thinking about that and the idea of femininity, of course, not just being associated with women, but also this idea that art in general is associated with femininity. And so that's kind of why I've included her here, because I was really thinking about this as sort of a term that can apply in a lot of different ways. So moving on, another thing that I started thinking about as well, and she kind of touches on this in her article, is this sort of dichotomy between fine art and craft. I think a lot of us, especially if you come from an art historical background, have really thought about fine art a lot, and also like the idea of craft, maybe not so much, but especially fine art, because we have these huge artists throughout art history that everybody refers to all the time. You go into Jansen, you go into Gardner's, and these are the people that you're learning about. And so here you can see over on the left side, I have a couple of bad boys of art, right? I like to refer to them that way. I've heard a lot of people have referred to them that way. I think it's kind of cute. But yeah, so we have like a very famous painting by Picasso here. We have the Mona Lisa. Of course, everyone knows the Mona Lisa by Da Vinci. And then also I was just pulling some I was thinking of sculpture as well, because fine art is often thought of as being sort of these huge prolific paintings done by, I mean, I hate to say it, but done by male artists, right? Throughout time, because a lot of times back, you know, in history, throughout history, women haven't had the same access to creating artworks, especially through sculpture and through oil painting in particular. And I think just in the past maybe 10 years, we're starting to get a lot of scholarship talking about, you know, Renaissance painters, Artemisia Gentileschi, list goes on of painters who actually were quite prolific during their time, but just haven't gotten that sort of historical recognition. But yeah, so here you can see I'm referencing some of the big guys. I've got Hellenic Nike of Samothrace, and then also of course the Mona Lisa, the Ladies of Avignon, which if you know the Ladies of Avignon, that is a huge painting in the middle of one of MoMA's galleries. It's actually a whole room dedicated to Picasso. Well, was formerly dedicated to Picasso, and I'll get to that in a minute whenever I'm talking about craft, because they've just recently changed that, which is exciting, and also sort of provokes a lot of conversation about I think their intentions here. But yeah, so as you can see, one line in my press release that I kind of comment about is that though genius has always been genius is often connected with men and also connected with fine art, and this idea of like creating art that is emotional and it kind of just like comes out of themselves, right? It's not something that you can teach, it's genius. So then here at the bottom you see I have genius versus amateur, and the reason I put this all in one slide is because they really intertwine a lot, and you can talk about them in a lot of different ways. I mean, you know, you can do this and this, and then you can go sort of linear, but all of them coincide together. But yeah, you can see here that they're definitely using the female form, and they've always sort of revered women, but they have not allowed them to quite get to the status of genius. And so that's partially what the show is about, but not completely. This is really just historical background that I'm giving you guys. And then over here on the right, we have a section about craft. In particular, here, I really wanted to point out the Tiffany lamp down at the bottom, because craft, as you may know, craft is normally associated with decorative arts. So you can see there's a lamp here, we've got pottery, we've got quilts. It's associated with decorative arts, you know, things that you use every day, whereas fine art is something that is sort of innate sometimes, or it's been thought of as innate, or it's not necessarily a skill, it's something that sort of comes out of the artist, and people look at it as a object of beauty. Craft traditionally has been thought of something that, you know, while beautiful, it's meant for a use, right? And especially like with the arts and crafts movement at the turn of the century, and Lewis Comfort Tiffany, a lot of that was sort of turned on its head. But that is sort of like the general idea of what craft is that craft can be taught. It's normally done by artisans. It's something that you can normally reproduce. But here, so I have a Lewis Comfort, or a Tiffany glass lamp. It's actually not done by, it wasn't designed by Lewis Comfort Tiffany himself. It was actually designed by a woman named Clara Driscoll, who was a designer at Tiffany Glass. So this is a very, it's a very well-known design, this dragonfly lamp design, but it was actually made and designed by Clara Driscoll. And her, as well as many other women who worked in Tiffany's glass shop, they're known as the Tiffany girls, made these patterns and designs, and were selling their artwork, you know, in the style of Tiffany through his name. So I think that's just like a really great example as far as like amateur hobbyists and being connected with gender there. Alongside here, I also have a quilt made by Faith Ringel, who is an artist of color. And this is, I believe called Echoes of Harlem. But again, here, it took quite a long time for her to really become recognized in sort of this mainstream art history kind of way. And even now, and she's working in textile here, but even now, going back to Ladies of Avignon, they have now put in MoMA, in the Picasso sort of area in MoMA, they have put a huge painting by Faith Ringel, which has been, it's sort of her rendition of the Guernica. I'm not sure if you guys are paying attention to that sort of change and shift in their galleries, but it's quite interesting to see that happening now. But whereas historically, you know, artists of color and women have just been, you know, sort of pushed on their rug, or, you know, not validated, and their work hasn't been sort of elevated in this way. And so here you can really see that dichotomy that's going on. I also have I have a piece of pottery here that's done by the ceramicist potter George Orr. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of him. I know as a native Mississippian, and I'm sure Sarah Hammond knows as well, George Orr has been a really amazing potter, and he is now actually in MoMA as well. But, you know, he was living from like 1857 to 1918 and really didn't have any recognition during his life, but now has sort of been elevated. And so I bring him in here because he is working in a medium that has been, you know, typically thought of as decorative or craft. And so that's just an example of things that, you know, I want you guys to be thinking about, and also just to have this sort of grounding to be thinking about how that's being applied to these artists in my show. And then also here on the back, we have a print by June Wayne. And I just wanted to include her here because I had referenced her article. But again, she was a major player in getting lithography back to the United States in the 60s. And she actually, I think she started like the first lithography workshop like in 1960 in Hollywood. And so it's just crazy because she started this Tamarin lithography workshop, and major male artists went through her studio, such as Rufino Tomeo. We also have like Philip Guston went there to learn how to do lithography. So I'm just showing you, like, there's this long line of women who have often not been given the recognition of these of what they should be, and been sort of demoted to this idea of amateurism or hobbyism. So moving forward, just with that background, I just wanted to kind of go through the exhibition goals for this show. So one of my goals is to disprove notions of medium hierarchy and the idea that craft / the feminine is lesser than the fine art / masculine. So basically, as I was telling you, there's this hierarchy where, you know, craft is sort of put lower than fine arts. You know, people just haven't really talked about it in the same way as they have fine arts. And so I kind of want to disprove this, taking a pretty strong stance here, because I don't really agree with it. And I don't think it's something that, you know, is really like necessary or helpful. The other thing that the other goal for this show is categorizations and associations with the feminine, quote on the feminine, are not socially are socially constructed and even at times arbitrary. So even this idea of like, what is feminine? I think especially in, you know, the past 10 years, we've really started to begin expanding this term in a social context, just having to do with like gender identities and LGBTQI issues. But I think especially in art, sort of asking this question that has been asked multiple times in the past, you know, is the label femininity or feminine even helpful? Do we need it? You know, what denotes femininity? And so I'm really trying to push that boundary in this show and say like, okay, well, we have had sort of this idea of feminine art could be applied to all of these artists, I think, but is it necessary? Does it make sense? So that's kind of my main exhibition goals here. So I'm going to go ahead and like wrap up my overview of the show and go ahead and get started on the artist panel. So here we go. I just was going to go through some of the works more up close too. So this is Austin Coudray. We have, this is a whole installation shot of Sarah Hammond. She does digital illustration. And then we have Yurie Hayashi. She's working in oil. You can see this is a rather large triptych. And then we have Chandra Samani, who's also working in oil and rather large scale. And then we have Kong Tom Win, who's doing assemblage and textile work. So I want to go ahead and just get the artist panel started. You guys are ready, right? All the artists. You guys can go ahead and unmute yourselves just so we're ready to answer. But I'm going to go ahead and move on and just go ahead and ask my first question here. So I just want to pose to you guys, when speaking with many of you in our studio visits for this exhibition, the theme of femininity, or gender for that matter, was not always immediately present in each of your work. However, the word feminine, as set in quotation marks in the title of this exhibition, is not meant to label each of your work as such, but more to provoke a discussion about historically imposed characteristics relating to gender and medium hierarchy as they show themselves and persist today. And then my question to you guys is, could each of you briefly speak to working in mediums that may have not always been associated with your gender identities, and if/how this has affected your practice? So whoever wants to go ahead and get started, we can go ahead and do that.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Okay, so like the medium I work in is digital. And it's funny because I think digital art doesn't have any connotation, any gender attached to it. I find that with digital work, it's very gender neutral, if anything. And with digital art, it's more of the conversation about, does it even count into fine art? Like, where does it have a place? But for me, it's kind of allowed me and pushed me to, I guess, kind of explore different themes outside of my immediate go-tos, which used to be portraits of girls and flowers, and has forced me to move in different color palettes, things like that. I've just been afforded more of a range through digital, pushed me outside of femininity, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. Who wants to go next?
Do we just dive in speaking?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so my medium is oil paints, and especially now that I'm thinking, especially when I was in undergrad and possibly the first time taking the oil paints class, the professor came into the class and said to everyone, is anybody pregnant? If you're pregnant, you cannot be in this class. That hasn't been affected to me personally, but so oil paints could be, I mean, paints are made out from mostly heavy metals, so it's not healthy for anyone, first of all. But I guess the solvent could possibly hurt human body in any way, and pregnancy could have been like somewhat very harmful with oil paints. So I think that could be something. And I also feel like oil paints I usually associate with almost exactly how Sarah started this presentation, with Jackson Pollock, Picasso, all these famous men artists, and I do agree with that. But at the same time, there were so many women artists working with oil paints, but just because of the hierarchy of men, women artists using the same material, yeah, it's like, yeah, made complete history out of it, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up sort of the harmful aspect of working in oil paint as well. I don't know if you guys have been watching, there's like a recent documentary on Bob Ross, and he actually ended up getting sick from the oil paints that he was using.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
All right. Chandresa
Sure,
or Austin, yeah.
yes, I could go next.
Okay.
Well, just thank you again for this opportunity. I think that we had a few conversations about the show. Just as an artist that identifies as he, him, I'm an artist that doesn't make work about gender or about necessarily what I was assuming the show was about when I heard the title. So I was very intrigued and interested to be reached out to. But I think that in mind, my work doesn't talk about gender really at all. But I definitely have thoughts on craft versus fine arts as a ceramic artist. And right now I'm kind of mixing between making pots and making sculptures. And I think that historically, vessels and ceramics has been seen as a hobby. Sort of like you mentioned earlier, it's also been largely a feminine activity. It's been like oftentimes, the I guess like, like the males have been out to work or hunt or etc. And the women have stayed to cook or make pots. And that's sort of like an old, I don't mean to say like there's only two, men and women. I just mean like historically, that's sort of how it's been seen. So I think I'm definitely in a field that's been seen as craft and feminine. And it's been interesting to sort of dedicate my adult life to trying to exhibit and show both vessels and sculptures, and also sort of how that's been seen as separate as well. I think like a vessel has been seen as a craft, within a sculpture is now slowly, a ceramic sculpture is now seen as a fine art. So I'm kind of playing this two-part role almost within one medium that I'm working at. I don't know, I don't mean to ramble or try to get off topic, but I think that's an interesting situation too, is how like one medium is now split into both fine art and craft, but it's the same thing.
Right.
I can go next.
Okay.
I guess, wait, can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Oh, okay. I can't see myself. Well, anyway, I feel like I work primarily with like found objects in assemblage, but also textiles. And when I first kind of like settled on like textiles as like a big, broad kind of material that I work with, I felt like I had to do it because of my gender identity as somebody who's non-binary, and as somebody who's gender fluid. I think because of my gender and because of, I guess, like in a broader way, like my queerness, I needed something that could like provide this like in-betweenness between like my own personal private life and then also like my family history. And textiles I saw as like being like the materiality of intimacy. I felt like it was really important for me to work with something that is both very present in like my home life with my family, but also like with my partner. And through that, I think that I've kind of like been able to create connections between, like connections that are both fictional and also very real between my family and my queerness. And also I've kind of like made some discoveries as well. For example, finding out that my great-grandmothers were silk weavers in Vietnam and Laos. My grandmother was like a tailor and seamstress, and my father had run like a tablecloth rental company. I think that this kind of like lineage is really important to me, and I don't think that I would have been able to discover that without having kind of like delved into my connection to like family and queerness through materiality.
Jessa?
I guess me.
Mhm.
In my work, I don't consider gender at all. But when you mention like size, my painting will be considered like masculine. And I was thinking about like, yes, because I'm considered more in wherever I paint, I'm considered to my feelings. But because of size, I also embrace masculinity and femininity because I also have those, and I believe every person has these together. Yeah, that's what I associate with this. But otherwise, what is good and which one is good or bad or less good, compared to masculine and femininity, I think it's stupid. Sorry.
Nice. Okay, and then I just kind of, I guess going off of what Austin was saying, I wanted to address Austin, you, and as well as Tom. I know, hold on. I wanted to address you guys regarding your inclusion in the show as artists who identify with either he, they, or like non-binary, they, them. How do you think both of you fit into the themes of this exhibition? And did either of you have any reservations about participating? I know that Austin kind of touched on this, so yeah, if you just want to elaborate any more.
I think for myself, I saw this kind of like as an opportunity to kind of realize like my connection to my gender, which like I think is like, it's been a work in progress. In the past, I felt like I was able to be very visually like kind of in touch with my gender identity. And over the past few years, up until very, very recently, I was working a job where I felt like a bit unsafe if I were to visually express like, you know, like the more feminine parts of myself. And so that, like, I guess as a result of that, it's really kind of like taken root in my work. And I think that seeing my work in conversation with like these other artists' work, I think that's been, I don't know, an opportunity, just like a place where I can observe myself from afar. I didn't have any reservations. Maybe I was a little bit nervous because it's been so long since I've like kind of talked about my gender like publicly. But I don't think that I felt like I didn't belong or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I can elaborate a little bit more too on what I said earlier. I think I had a lot of reservations, and there's many times where I thought about like reaching out and saying like I don't want to be in the show anymore. And I guess the reason behind that is I think that there's so many excellent artists in my field that are not masculine, and that are feminine or non-binary, or identify in another category that's not masculine. And I think that I felt at first, being a part of the show, that I was taking away a spot from a more feminine artist that could I'm trying to choose my words here. I felt that I was taking away a spot from an artist that could more benefit, or could be more, that would fit more than myself, just because I don't talk about sort of these topics very much in general, or in my work. I think ultimately, like I said, we decided that I should stay in the conversation. And I'm sorry, Wiley, go lay down. Sorry. I think that we ultimately decided that I should be in the show, and sort of I'm glad I did, because I definitely gained a lot of perspective. These are all very important topics, I believe, and things that I have been excited to learn more about. Being from the Midwest, I grew up with very little information about any of these sort of topics and ideas. So I've been super encouraged and excited, and I've been able to understand my own identity and my own work, I think, being in these conversations and in this work. And I think that I also just, appreciate you reaching out to me, because this has been, I think it's just really, it's been really, sorry, I'm trying to think how to say this, but I guess, yeah, I did have reservations, and I hope that no one feels that I've, like, I guess want to say that, like, I do not, like, I'm not sitting here like saying like I am the ceramics field, or I don't want to represent ceramics, I don't want to represent anybody else. I'm just here as my own artist, and saying that I understand kind of that I am like a white male who like, I don't want to come in and be like, I, am ceramics, or I identify as, or I like am saying like, this is what ceramics is, but I just want to say like, I'm here to sort of offer up my perspective on craft versus fine art. And so I didn't want to come into the show as somebody that I wasn't, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you for that, Austin. All right, so just for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So this question, I want to focus on your work, your digital illustration, Sarah. I know that you first started out as a painter, but have moved to primarily creating work digitally via the program Procreate. You also create work quickly, usually over the course of a day, and I've even described your artistic process as a kind of instant gratification. Could you tell us a bit about your process and your motivations for creating work in this way? Also, any comments on your work as digital and the way of medium hierarchy would be welcome. And I think you kind of touched on that earlier. So.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I used to do oil painting portraits, and when I got out of school, financially that just wasn't possible. I felt very limited in like physical mediums, just based on what I was feeling. I had a lot of personal things going on at the time. I was not afforded the ability to commit. Oil takes a minute to dry, and that just doesn't, that for what I wanted to communicate when I was feeling something, I needed speed, efficiency, and the ability to quickly switch up elements, play with colors, and feel kind of unrestricted by my medium. And so I shifted towards drawing and eventually into digital illustration, because it does offer that speed, efficiency, and I guess I've been able to grow more because I'm just not limited to physical time, which is, labor, with ceramics, like glazing, kiln, drying time. Like I don't have any of that. I'm able to very quickly feel an emotion and then sketch it out and then take it in. And that's not to say sometimes it doesn't take longer, but it definitely, like, I've been able to just churn out works and move as I feel, opposed to having to sit in a feeling and process it over a long amount of time with painting or something like that. But I do find that, digital, the shift from having a fine art background into something like digital work, which is kind of seen a little hobbyist, and maybe more media and marketing, I do have a hard time placing my work and almost treating it as if it is a serious art form, because it isn't something the art world treats as a serious art form. And I find and when you look through time, any medium that is seen as quick at any point is kind of seen as less than through the eyes of higher art institutions. So I feel like digital, we're just in a current era of, we just don't have a place for it yet. Similar to how I think printmaking was treated at one point in time. It's in process. I'm not sure where to put digital art, because it's part of a struggle for me, and taking myself seriously, and my emotions seriously, my work seriously. So it's something I still struggle with. I don't have many answers to that.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for that. Also, in the way of process, I wanted to ask Yurie. So you also have a rather unique process in which you create 3D maquettes and then transfer this onto canvas using trompe-l'oeil, so trick of the eye. Could you speak a bit about this and the chaos of temptation of society?
So my process is first to create these 3-dimensional maquettes out from, started off really tiny, small scale papers, but now I've been working on big, actually the exact same size of the painting, individual shapes I've been working on. But I'm understanding my process as when I'm working or starting or creating the abstraction of the maquette, it's more of my emotional dump site. it's kind of like, let's do brainstorm. It helps you when you write everything on the memo kind of thing. Like dumping everything on there, which I'm not really thinking, on the process. But then when I'm starting to paint and observe and staring at forever, like that that work, I spent whole year working on it. So then I'm starting to understanding what was so much about that, the emotions behind the dump site, more like. And then this pink poodle, I bought it, and I've been calling the poodle as my emotional support animal, which is like not like actual animal, but I found it's very funny to hang by 1 feet. It's not funny, but so as the tissue box too, because tissue box we associate with so many other things too. But I think other than the process of making and painting, I think there, especially with this piece, I think my religion is definitely affecting how I see and how I perceive the world. So I am Buddhist and practicing Shinto, and because of that, I believe in human souls, and because of that, I see human bodies as meat blob with a soul inside. So that work present the meat blob pushing each other's feelings, emotions, all kind of thoughts and story sharing. And it's all about me, not so much of you, but there's always me, but try to make as a whole and work as a whole to create a society out of it. So I think that was one of the big thing behind the piece, I think. If that make any sense. I'm like just sorry.
Oh, that was great. Thank you so much for that.
Mm.
And then also just talking about Chandrasa a little more. I can go ahead and go to her slide. Oh, there we go. You can see her paintings. So Chandrasa, I was hoping we could speak specifically about the two artworks that we have included in the exhibition. So you see them here. They're part of the Harmony of Rush series. Could you speak about the duality of these two works and the emotion/time that goes into creating them?
So yes, I've been, when I moved to New York, I've had to face Rush, and then I start to figuring out how can I figure out this, make it comfortable in harmony with this life, Harmony of Rush. And I present this duality of reality and memories when they come back, and emotional side and feelings helps to get into harmony with the Rush and environment. The feelings, reality and memories create together. I was in the painting of Harmony of Rush feelings. It was the way going home, rushing to go home from work, early from work. It was a really good day, but I had to rush. I had to go home to do some stuff, and close to the street under the bridge was a vacant area which somebody crossed the grass, which I was running, but kind of frustrated. But the smell of the grass, just cut fresh grass, brought my memory back, my childhood memory from Kosovo, and this connection lifted my feelings high, and I felt amazing and fascinated how I feel this, and how they brought harmony in me, how my attitude and my feeling change. And this was helped me to be aware of and give attention to feelings. And that's why I'm running. And also when I saw that field, I got a memory of my grandfather mowing the grass, and we as a kid running to get flies. And I kind of felt him like screaming, don't go close to the mowing tools. But that feeling was so real, but it also was so good combined with my reality in New York. I was fascinated how the memories from Kosovo came back to New York and met my reality here. And this was a very interesting combination, which I felt the feelings. I came in aware that the harmony comes from feelings, and I need to pay attention to that. The same thing also happened with the blue one, like wind. I was going to work at night. It was dark and kind of afraid and rushing, but the wind was so much wind and kind of dirty wind. But I felt so released in the running wind, like felt like I'm escaping to myself, I'm escaping for something else, from work to myself. And that natural action made me, when I say my natural action, I mean like wind, rain, smell. It's so good resource to connect you with a feeling, even if you're not aware of it. Because the way I was running to work, I was not really aware of my feeling, but the wind showed my feeling. Here, I am here, I exist. And this was how this duality came to me, and I'm happy I got chance to really honestly put it in a canvas and feel them alive, emotions alive. And then when times goes creating, I find very important to be with my heart honest during the process of painting, because I want the feelings to be alive in canvas when I pass by art. But the way what took me so long is because of my circumstances of living at that time were difficult. I couldn't allow myself to fight for a space to paint, because feelings will mess up in me, and I got confused. So I finished my painting when I got my own apartment. But I lived that feeling, and all the time I go by, like, I want to see them alive, especially when I'm honest with my heart.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then just for my last question to sort of wrap up here, and then we're going to have a Q&A from the audience. So I wanted to direct this question to Yuriye, Chandresa, and Tom. So the three of you have either traveled to the United States to live / obtain an education. So Yuriye or Chandresa, I think you just moved here, or were born in the United States as second generation. I'm referring to Tom, from immigrant parents. Could each of you speak to how being from another culture has affected your perceptions of gender, and if / how being from non-American cultures has affected your work?
I can go.
Okay.
I think for me, it's complicated. I think because it's constantly in motion. There's no kind of like conclusion that I have with regards to like perceptions of my own gender being like non-binary, but very much being perceived and definitively so as like assigned male at birth and like strictly male by my family. Like that is just something that is slowly like we're working through it. I think it's more so like in my work that like my family's history and their like the cultures that I grew up, like how that kind of like makes an appearance, just to give everybody else like background. Like I come from a family of refugees. They're from Laos and from Vietnam, and there is like very clearly like that has very clearly kind of like affected the way that I've grown up. Like the effects of war have just been ever present. War and violence have just been ever present in the ways that my parents, my grandparents do everything. And one thing that I've noticed a lot is attachment to objects. So little things that don't really matter, but have I grew up with like trinkets and things being like we kept on to them because of their associations with a specific person who's no longer here. And I think that they did that more so than I noticed than like other friends of mine and their families, strictly because they lost everything that they owned prior to coming to the US. And in the refugee camps, they were forced to like give up a lot of things as well. And so I think for me, like that's kind of like my attachment to assemblage and like found objects, but also like to textiles, because a lot of times the fabric that I work with for both weaving and the drawings on fabric are from like my family, like bed sheets that are no longer functional and clothing. So yeah, I think that with regards to gender, it's something that I'm kind of still thinking through, but it's very much like I would say that like my family history has definitely kind of like led me to not want to like exclude them from my gender in a way, or like conversations. And so like it's something I'm working up towards, I would say. But with my work, it's very much a part of like why I'm even an artist and why I even exist, I think.
And UDA or Chandrasa, would you like to address the question?
All right, I start already.
Or?
You did. Okay, so I moved to New York alone and by myself, but since I moved it, I had to face it. I was affected, of course, with a rush, which it wasn't my style of living in Kosovo. But the things it made me to recognize the problem seriously. This problem was a suppressed woman in Kosovo and lots of sexism there, and it's really, really, really sad, and made me think and made me sad because I recognized nothing, really totally nothing's come good from that. And hearing the news and seeing how many women being killed for years because of sexism and masculine culture, it made me I got affected to see this effect here much more than being in Kosovo, because probably I was too young there and I was a daughter and I didn't know I couldn't figure out how I understand the problem deeply, how women are suppressed, being a mother or being a wife. And coming here, I understood that problem, and it's really, really sad. Yeah, I'm sad for that.
Okay. Then UDA, do you want to add anything, or we can move on if not?
I mean, yeah, Japan is very popular for everybody, but still it's a big island. So although having all the internet, all the globalization and everything, we still have so much expectation towards just simply being women or simply being men, or we don't have the idea of having in between, and that's really troublesome as being, being popular country. But I think that's pretty much it from me. Yeah.
Sarah, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was saying I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to the audience. If you guys want to ask me, or if you want to ask any of the artists questions, feel free to unmute yourself, and we can just go ahead and go for that.
Did I get to make a comment about this artist talk?
Sure.
I think this is really awesome and great opportunity to hear everybody else's story, and by simply seeing their work, I mean, visually, it gives me idea who the person is or who the person are, but more of hearing individual stories, it's like, this is so great. So thanks for this opportunity. I'm like so happy to meet everybody and hear everybody's story, and thanks for sharing all of it.
Yeah, I really wanted this to be an opportunity for like all of you guys to meet and also be able to sort of verbalize how you feel about your work and the show in general. So that's really what this was for. So I'm glad to hear that. Right. I'm just gonna keep pausing for a minute. Maybe someone will think of a question.
Sarah, I have a question for you while we're waiting.
Sure.
So I know, I'm sure the size of the gallery helped
Mhm.
choose this, but how did you decide how many artists to be in the show? When you could have had less, you could have had more. What was kind of your consensus on us?
Yeah, sure. So I think as far as like Kunstraum, it's been so interesting to work with them for about the past 2 years, because each time I get to see how each curator sort of transforms the space and how they decide, how many artists they want to use or how little artists they want to use. I know one of the stipulations for the space is that we have to do a group show. So I was definitely always going to do a group show, but I also wanted to make sure that rather than trying to pack in a ton of artists, that each artist was really going to have enough space for their artwork to sort of breathe a little bit, where you could kind of come in and see the work, especially for instance, like Tom's work, right whenever you walk in, right by the sign. I just felt like it was that particular work, Finico Dare's Trident, was really sort of encapsulated a lot of the ideas that I was trying to go for. So as far as curation, I definitely tried it was a lot dependent on the space. Like for instance, Yorie's work, I think you guys remember whenever Yorie, you actually brought in the artwork for the first time. Chindrasa was there and we were like, oh, should we change the walls? Should we put Yorie's where the window is going to come in, and should we change them up? And we ended up going with my original plan, which was to put it in the corner there and then also have Chidressa's work on that wall. And that was primarily because Chidressa specifically wanted to have the sunlight coming in. But yeah, like those curatorial decisions were definitely something that like I thought about a lot and tried to make it where, you know, you could really enjoy the artwork kind of singularly. Not everyone is grouped like together, like all of their works are grouped together, but I tried to make it where it would fit well in the space. And as far as just, yeah, the amount, I just didn't want to overcrowd too much is really, I think working in a smaller space is what I had in my head.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think you made some really smart decisions.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay.
Hello? Hi, I have a question actually for Austin and his works, because I was looking through them and going with, you know, like the theme of craft versus fine art. One of the things that kind of stuck out to me was like a few of his works were really like, oh, like this is like part of it looks like like something you would use, like something you would literally use in your house, right? Like I'm sorry if I can't name the piece, but and then it's connected to something that's very like ornamental, fine art, like so I kind of wanted to ask like your like thought process through like thinking up these shapes and like yeah, like these pieces, like thinking up these shapes and like how you sort of like put it together and how you're like, this is what I want to create. I know it's like an abstract question. Sorry, this is my first.
No, it's okay. That's a great question. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it. I think I briefly mentioned earlier that I've been kind of trying to figure out this idea of, you know, where is something, you know, fine art, where is something craft, and for me that often puts me like in my own medium. It puts me between, you know, if I make a sculpture that's fine art, and I can exhibit it as this expensive piece, and I can say that it means something, you know, I can kind of relate it to mean something deeper or more personal or something about my life. Whereas if I make like a pot, I can be like, yeah, this is like how I'm paying my rent this month. So I think it's kind of this interesting like duality of like, I think the work is derived from that idea of like, you know, for a long time I was trying to say like, am I a potter? Am I a sculptor? Like basically like in the sense of this conversation, this gallery talk, it's like, am I, you know, a fine artist or am I making craft almost in a way? And I think that shapes the pieces a lot because you know, a year or two ago, I stopped thinking about them as, you know, either a sculpture or a pot and started thinking them as both. And so for a while I was saying that I was making sculptural pots and functional sculptures. And so I think with that sort of idea in mind, like I wanted each piece to have a function. And I believe each one does, minus the cloud and grid sort of piece. I mean, I guess it could be like a vase, but I wanted each piece to have a function. Yeah, that piece doesn't necessarily really have a function. I mean, it could. I had a lady told me once that it would be a great doorstop, and I said, yeah, you're probably right. But I think I wanted each piece to sort of both have function and have some sort of aesthetic. And so I don't know if I'm answering your questions, but I guess that's how I've sort of decided to add these extra elements, is just so it takes it a little bit out of each one and sort of combines the two. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that totally does. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And thank you for asking. That's a great question.
All right. Also, I know we're past 2. I think we're about 2:04, so not too far past. So if any of you guys need to leave, I totally understand that. But yeah, I'd love to continue the conversation if you guys have more questions.
I just to add to what Austin was saying and to Mo's question as well, it's less of a question of just contributing to the conversation, but I think, yeah, we're still dislodging opinions or that's how I envision it, is for the general public. They've kind of been trained or taught that there are these distinctions, these like false hierarchies and binaries between craft and fine art. And so you think about fine art as something that you contemplate, or you walk into it's something that hangs on a wall. Its function is to engage like the mind, but not so much your hands or use. And so, you know, I imagine people being part of this talk, or even those listening in, we kind of understand that that's not where contemporary art is. Contemporary art can be functional and something that's part of your day-to-day life. Art doesn't have to be this thing that's in a rarefied realm or rarefied space that you cautiously approach. And it's, you know, there's a lot of barriers that were broken down in the 20th century, but I still think there's, in the 21st century with the general public, it's tough to convey and break down these hierarchies because they were so entrenched. But I think exhibitions like this are good because it exposes people to the theories and work that has been going on for a long time, to kind of show that, yeah, these, I hesitate to say arbitrary distinctions, because all the distinctions that were made, like between media, serve the purpose to basically like solidify power structures and who participated and who didn't, and why certain things sold. So there was commercial, like financial motivations behind this, but yeah, I think this show brings out these ideas and makes it, people question, oh, why is this considered higher or perceived to be higher, allegedly?
Yeah, thanks for that, those comments, Tony. All right, and then also, of course, this is open for artists to ask each other questions too, if you would like. All right, don't mean to rush anyone. So this is sort of the last call for you guys. If you have any more questions, feel free to go ahead and jump in. Give you a couple of more moments. All right then. Well, this has gone really great, and I'm so glad that you guys were all able to participate and really have this great conversation. You know, I hope we can continue having it as well. You know, if you haven't seen the show, I would love to set up a time for anyone who's listening in who hasn't seen the show. Feel free to email me at sarah@kunstraumllc.com. And we can set up a time. But yeah, again, thank you so much to Kunstraum LLC for allowing us to have the show in space, and also to Tony for helping me sort of moderate and facilitate this, and of course to all the artists who have participated. So I hope you guys have a great day, and yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
All right, I think is it just us? Great. Okay, y'all. All right, yeah, of course, thank you so much for coming. Yeah, we'll be in touch for the rest of the show, and yeah, that's about it. That's all I got.
See you soon.
All right, bye.
Thank you, Sarah.